Hi, everybody, and welcome back to RHAP's coverage of Australian Survivor Redemption. My name is Mike Bloom, and the penultimate week of Australian Survivor Redemption officially in the books. And it was quite the end of a chapter for one particular person. But in 1 week's time, we will know the winner of this entire season. And given those we have left, it is sure to be an interesting tale going back to the book analogy. But regardless, we have to get into everything going on with the final five, culminating in an outcome that I think had a lot of fans keeling over Keely, as we will get into everything that went down here. Now, of course, we're going to have quite the showdown going on over the next 3 episodes. And so to break down what's to come in this high noon atmosphere, I'm saying high noonin. It is Noonan from Australian Survivor Brains vs. Brawn 2.
Hi, that was such a good segue. That's the best segue I've ever had. That
Oh my
was good.
God. Wow, that is high praise as well. Well,
I've got
Noonan,
a lot of segue. Yeah.
I'm so excited to have you on here because I feel like we're moving on with the pace of a segue here. We are flying through these episodes, but we are getting I wouldn't even say like a wild boot order because again, on paper, if you look at the people who have been personified as the big threats, it makes sense that they go home the way they do. But as is the case with even the most straightforward boots here on Australian Survivor Redemption, we are taking the biggest crazy straw path to get the drink in our mouths here. So before we even get into this episode, I'm keen to hear your thoughts. Now that it's nearly at the end here, what have your thoughts been about Redemption so far?
I think this season has had an incredible pace. It has just been it's had the perfect blend of a smooth sort of start where we're really focusing on the returnees, and then inch by inch these little rookies are just like putting their stamp on the game, and I've loved it as a fan of the show. I've loved it as a player. I'm like, damn it, they're so good. They're so much better than we are. Damn it. But I've just loved the tenacity and the intensity of the season. It's I can't believe we're almost at the end.
Yeah, intensity is a good way to put it. And I feel like sometimes there's a connotation there with like an emotional intensity. Like I feel like Blood versus Water might be a case of that where you could tell there were a lot of emotional stakes that were put into it. But here's much more of a strategic intensity where we
Yeah.
even seen this episode, right? Both Loz and Sally come to the same conclusion of like, oh my God, I gotta do something. Oh no, it's like having a
Yeah.
budget surplus at work, right? Like, well, I gotta spend this by the end of the quarter or else what am I going to do with it? And so you see, again, a surprising amount of moves, at least intending to be made or debating to be made, but it all ends with what we sort of surmised the episode at the start of the episode, which is a 3-2 vote against Keely. Frighteningly similar cycle here, Noonan, where
Yeah.
you have Brooke win immunity, vote out Simon. You have Keely win immunity, vote out Brooke. Jackson perhaps breaking the cycle here, but he still wins immunity, and Keely is gone. So as we were going through Tribal Council, which didn't necessarily go live, but certainly had its fair amount of trademark whispering to it, I am curious from your perspective, did you think either Sally was going to play her idol on Keely or she was going to join Keely and Jackson and vote out Loz? Or did you feel like it was going to be a Keely boot no matter what?
I felt I was pretty sure it was going to be Keely. There was too much talk leading up to that. Everyone thought there's no way anyone is beating Keely. So I even thought the fact that they were entertaining the idea of keeping her around, crazy. I was like, they can't really be that. Surely they're just playing with Keely here because she's beat the check has her name on it. So now they're like, crap, we can't give this to Keely now. So I think in the dire moments of Tribal, when Keely finally told Sally, I have the other half, I was hoping as a fan that I was like, Sally, this is actually the bigger move. Like, this is the bigger move. And she's giving it to you right now. But she doesn't bite. And which is correct. It's the correct move. Get rid of Keely. But you just want Keely to stay around because she's just doing so. Yeah, she's got the money already. Like it's just, yeah, it was a hard one, but I definitely thought for sure there was no way they weren't voting her out.
Yeah, so, game merit aside, because I do agree. Yeah, I think especially with no Brooke, I feel like Keely is really having the spotlight on her. Yes, Jackson is with her, but remember, the narrative of essentially this entire post-merge since the jury started has been
Mhm.
call them boomerang, call them returnees, call them kaput. Like, these people are on the bottom. If they make it to the end, they have a hell of a story. They have people stumping for them on the jury. And so it made the most sense to do. It just was still a little surprising to me based on the narrative. And not to get too much into the edit of Australian Survivor, but something that I'm going to be so intrigued to get into a week from today is look, I'll stay straight up, and this might be more famous last words that I've continued to do over the course of this very season, but I feel like it's going to be either Caleb or Jackson at this point. Like, I just
Mhm.
cannot see a world where it is Loz or Sally. If that is the case, they have done them dirty with the way they have been edited. But it's been so interesting to follow the discourse, right? Where, again, the storyline basically for the entire jury phase has been okay, it's everyone against these four
Yeah,
people. And those 3 or 4 people have gotten so much airtime and so much narrative focus that you think, okay, well, clearly one of them is somehow going to win, right? This is how Australian Survivor usually does things as of late. They want a quote unquote main character to
yeah,
win. They want audiences to be able to say, okay, look at our hero. They made it to the end of the journey and they walked away victorious. Not to say that the others can't necessarily be heroes in their own right, but we're not going to get that this
yeah,
season. And it's great for unpredictability. I think that you get a lot of praise onto Australian Survivor. I think a lot of people say that, maybe one of the downsides of it is that they do a bit of obvious editing, especially when you get to the end game of like, okay, only a certain number of people can win in terms of the feast or famine of the editing. I know the winner of your season, Miles, has certainly spoken about that to a
yeah.
certain perspective. So I'm happy that that is not going to be the case, but it's sad that it comes at the cost of said main characters really kind of blindsiding us in not making it to the final two, final three, even final four at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I think Australian Survivor does a really good job at justifying the winner for us. I remember back in old school Survivor days, like you'd get a winner and you'd be like, oh, how'd they win? How'd they win? I hated them the whole time. How'd they win? And I think Australian Survivor plays that into the edit. They want you to love the winner and they want you to feel like the winner has truly, truly earned it. And maybe that's why they get highlighted a little bit more. It doesn't necessarily mean Sally and Loz aren't doing a lot.
Right.
It's just not pushing the story. And that's what I say to a lot of people. If you're not pushing the narrative, then like no matter how much you do, it's not going to be shown. And that's a bitter pill for a lot of Australian Survivor players to swallow. But this just feels so heavy. All these decisions that they're making right now feels really heavy. There feels like there's so much weight to these easy decisions, and I don't think there should be. But I think that's just a little trick in the edit to make us feel like, oh, this is a do or die decision for Sally when it's probably not. It's a do or die for Keely.
Yeah, that's exactly it too. Because I agree with you that again, I think the decision to get rid of Keely made sense for basically everybody but Jackson. So it makes sense the vote played out here. Yes, there is a little bit of toying, as Sally will say to Laws, of, oh, well, just because we don't take Keely out here doesn't mean we can't take her out at the final four or final three. We just did this with Brooke, where again, we have this nonsense unanimous vote against Cameron, and then now we decide to just do an easy peasy, take out
Yeah.
of Brooke next time. But it just feels too close to the end. You could even argue that Keely had a bigger spotlight on her than a Brooke, than a Simon, despite the fact that, again, she's not a returnee, of being the only person left with quote unquote the biggest resume, that it's like
Yeah.
so far out in front as opposed to 2 or 3 people out in front that the allure was just way too bright if she got close to the end there. And so it makes sense. What makes less sense for me is the way it was done. We need to talk about this public overture with this half idol. and I get it's a difficult position for Sally, right? As she has opined both previously and in this very episode, like she is panicking a little bit in a big move culture of this season. She needs something. She needs a pelt. She needs a head mounted on that wall. And the only amount of power she has amassed in a physical perspective almost is this half idol, which was important in keeping power out of Brooke and Keely's hands. And so she's going to try the hair. It didn't work with Brooke. Brooke saw right through that. And so now she's like, okay, Keely, give this to me and I will protect you. I'll use it on you or I'll vote with you. And then she decides to stand up and basically say, well, I'm glad you gave this to me so I could give it back to you. Thanks so much, friend. Hope you have a
Oh,
good time. Remember this. Hope you are able to, craft this into a fine piece of jewelry at Ponderosa. And so I'm really feeling a couple different ways about this.
yeah,
Like, what
yeah.
was this?
I
Was this Scar in the Lion King when Mufasa's hanging on the cliff, being like, "Long live the king," and just digging her claws into Keely before she ends up falling to the wildebeest below?
I think it was I think Sally's idea of a big move is this grandeur performance in front of the jury. And that's not necessarily where the weight in her move comes from. I get wanting to flaunt it and be like, look, I've convinced Keely to give it to me. That's a bit of a flex. But I think had Sally played it either for Keely, which would have been diabolical, but had she played it for Loz or Caleb or played it for herself, I think that would have cemented her read on the game because a lot of people are assuming she doesn't have one. So if she knows there's a discourse or there's some disagreements between Caleb and Loz, they're both bringing up each other's name. This could have been a way to unite them. She could have saved Loz and been like, no matter what was happening, if I have an opportunity to save you, Loz, I'm going to save you. Because you're about to go into a Final Four scenario where
Mm.
if Jackson wins or if Caleb wins, what are these two women going to do? You need to solidify something. And I think that would have been a good opportunity instead of just dangling the carrot and then no one eating it. She didn't even eat the carrot. So I get what she was trying to do because she's like, I've got to make this grand gesture in front of the jury, but it probably didn't land the way she expected it to.
I think especially because, and I don't know, obviously, if she saw the reaction that Keely had in the moment, but Keely was not happy. What's really interesting is that we've had this string, right, of people being turned on, but really going out with a stiff upper lip, whether it was Mark with Caleb, whether it was Ben with Jackson, Simon with Brooke, Brooke with Keely. They immediately stood up and they're like, you know what? I get it. I get it. Good game. I do
Mm.
wonder if Sally was hoping Keely would do that, right? Continue the trend. But something that does need to be a stark reminder to both the players and to us is that Keely is not a returnee, despite the people that
Yes.
she associates with. And so, again, things could change once she gets a little sleep, once she gets food in her belly. But Noonan, this is the first time in a while where it felt like there was a little bit of saltiness going into the jury. Keely ends her final words by saying, I don't have anything to say about Sally. Doesn't that say a lot?
Yeah. And I love it. The saltier, the bitter, the better. Bring back real emotion in Survivor. It's so, and speaking from experience as someone who subtly exploded at one point, I think it's natural. Don't try and hide it in that last moment. Like, who cares? Like, really give it, put your last mark on the game. And I think if it is a good gentle reminder that Keely is a rookie. And I think had she been a returnee, they do keep their like thoughts and their emotions closer to their chest. And she'd done so well all game to come back from tribal if she'd been blindsided or if she wasn't on the right side of the vote at composing herself. But nothing hurts more than getting voted out. So I think she was just like, screw it, screw it. And I think it had Sally seen the real reaction, I think Sally would be like, oh, there's a vote I don't have on the jury. And so it'll be interesting to see if that bites her in the butt later or if she kind of gets a little bit of credit for it. Who knows?
Yeah, that's the big question, is that as much as we might be, maligning this move, that it felt like kind of unnecessarily stringing Keely along, for all we know, it could be looked at as like, okay, well, Sally was able to convince Keely in the moment to give her the half idol, to not do what Brooke did, which is basically like, no, screw you all. I'm not going to give it to you.
Yeah.
Now, I guess the question is, does Keely feel it's final five? So it's not like Jackson could have used the half idol for anything, right? There are no idols left in the game. But to me, at least initially, it just feels like you have this tight relationship, right? Like Keely is promising you to your face, I'm going to take you to the end. It does kind of feel like if you were mugging someone and you like stab them and they're dying in the alley, and then then you grab their wallet. It's like, okay, well, that's sure, but you
Yeah.
could have waited a few minutes until they died and then be able to then grab the idol off of them. So again, maybe I'm baking too much on Keely's immediate reaction. This could be something where it's like, wow, Sally was so good that she had me convinced the entire day that she was going to vote with me and Jackson. And so I didn't go in a lot of different directions. But right now, and again, this could completely change. My read is like, okay, I was able to get this half idol away from someone who was incredibly desperate and would do anything and would go along with any plan just to survive in the game, which doesn't seem like that incredibly impressive to me.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think yeah, I agree 100%. I don't we might see something change in Keely, her when she's like yeah, like you said, has a full stomach and has some sleep. But I think in Sally's mind, it's Keely and Brooke especially had been stringing everyone along for so long. I have an idol. It's not real. I have this idol. It's probably real. This one's also real. So I think Sally, in a way, was like, okay, master, I'm the apprentice. Maybe it's my time to do
Mm,
something the same, but it just doesn't have the same effect on it. So I think maybe in hindsight, we're being a little bit unfair to Sally because it's
yeah.
happened to her the entire time. So now it was her time to do it. She just probably didn't need to do it then. So it's just it's hard. It's hard to weigh up making this big move because it seems like that's weighing on all of them a lot. They're like, "What's my big move?" But my biggest problem with that is they're then saying, "This is my big move" to the people that they're going to vote out. I'm like, "No, don't tell them. Don't tell them that this is your big move." Because that's so easy to feed and like stroke your ego. Yeah, this is your big move, Sally. Like, and it's so easy to entice people. I'm not telling people my big move until the end, but then I'm going to
Yeah.
claim my big move.
It's like if you declare like, well, I'm funny. It's like, no, if you're really funny, you'd show it, not necessarily
Yeah,
tell it. And it's
yeah,
tough because again, we talked the past couple episodes about how transparent Sally is in some of these moves, as we saw with her trying to do the same thing with Brooke in the last episode of like, no, give me this half idol, I'll work with you. It's like your plan doesn't really make any sense. I will give her kudos that like she did seem, as I speculated last episode, she really seemed to be at least shown to us as the middle woman between these two pairs. I really like what you said earlier about the idea of playing the idol on Caleb or especially Loz, because
yeah,
we find out at the beginning of this episode, apparently, that Loz is the middle person between Caleb and Sally. At least that's the way that Keely and Jackson feel. And so, as you mentioned, if Jackson does win at the final four, or if it comes down to a final three of those three, then Loz could be in a position where she has a lot of different directions she can go. And so
yeah.
if you're seeing like how close Loz and Caleb at least were before Loz decided to start turning on Caleb, and you want to shore up an indebted relationship to someone like Loz, maybe use the idol on her. Yeah, it would ultimately be, not necessarily a game-changing move because Loz would have only gotten 2 votes anyway, assuming that you stick with them. But at the same time, it does feel like a very public gesture to be like, look what
Mm,
I did with this. I could have played it on Keely. I could have somehow snapped it back in half and given it to her again. But I chose to play it on you. This shows Loz how committed I am. And what it comes down to, Noonan, is, you talk about people out of desperation wanting to make these big moves and narrating it along the way. Essentially, it's really only 2 people at this point. And I think what we are experiencing right now is, again, in a very resume forward cast, that Loz and Sally are both kind of realizing at the same time, like, oh no, I don't have a lot of great job experience. And so they
yeah,
are trying to get a lot of odd jobs leading up to hopefully the final interview in the hopes of standing a chance compared to Jackson and Caleb, who, again, compared to the other people, do not have a lot, but they each have one quote unquote big move they can speak to.
Yeah, I think the writing's on the wall for Loz and Sally. It seems like that reality has come crashing down quite quickly, which I don't know if it's the edit, but it's surprising because once you're in the end game when there's like 7 or 8 of you left, so you know that the resume building has well and truly started. So I'm a little surprised it's taken them this long, but again, that could just be the edit. But another thing I find super fascinating is this conversation that they've had about, well, you guys have all worked together. So you guys, none of you have moves. All your moves are team based, are collective. And yes, that may be true, but there's a way to word that at tribal council where you can still take credit for it while also giving credit to those around you. You can still say, hey, I was super social and I put myself in the right position and I said that this was a great idea and you all happen to agree with it. Cool. We all took the credit. I'm not going to take the credit then and there because then you're going to target me. So there's a way to go about it that I just think they haven't figured out yet. And I think instead of saying, I need a big move, it should be a conversation with Caleb and Jackson being like, are you two really going to take each other? Are you really going to take each other? You may as well take Loz and I. So I think cementing your spot in a final two is also a big move. If you can convince two big players that their threat level is so high and you're so nothing, that's still a move that you can capitalize on. And we've seen it happen before. People have won in a very similar way. So it's just about pitching the right thing to the right person. And I agree with the idol. If she'd played it for Loz, you play to that emotion. You could even lie to Loz and say, I wasn't sure about Caleb. Caleb had said your name. There's so many things you could do with a big gesture like that. But it's just make your big moves earlier, but don't tell them it's your big move. Just write it down.
Is it possible that maybe Brooke got in their head that one time when she's like, listen, I had people go to Final Tribal Council before and take credit for things that they should not have gotten credit for, and it bit them in the end that, like, now these people are like, I need to make individualistic moves. I mean, I see largely what you're saying, but I also know that the vast majority of the time, it's really tough to change hearts and minds at Final Tribal Council. Brooke was part of a jury that did that, maybe, but that was very special circumstances. So I think maybe some of these people are feeling like it's too little too late if I'm like, yeah, I went along with these votes, but actually these were the reasons that I did so. I mean, the other thing is that for Sally, again, another reason why I think your idea of playing it for Loz makes sense is that I do feel like Sally and Loz need to sit next to each other in the end. You know, from our perspective, as well as I'm imagining from the on-island perspective, Caleb and Jackson both made these very public, again, individualistic flips. Make of it what you will as to whether they were necessary or not. Looking at you, Jackson, like that is something that people can point to with this very specific type of jury. And so the two of them need to make plans to sit next to each other. And we can talk about this when it comes to Loz's move to target Caleb here, which still is very possible. Like you want to shore that up. You need to sort of look at someone who's maybe not necessarily your GOAT here, but at least your equal. And so I think the two of them need to make a move that favors that scenario. And so it's interesting when we get this situation where they're like, oh yeah, girls again, right? We could definitely remember the Redbacks. That's totally a thing. Yeah, we'll get Caleb here. Don't you worry. I think that, again, them taking out Keely makes so much sense because she was threatening in so many ways. From a challenge perspective, obviously from a jury perspective, it didn't make sense to use her as a vote. I wonder, though, Noonan, if Jackson doesn't win immunity, and let's say Keely doesn't, let's say Sally wins immunity here, do you think Jackson goes instead of Keely? Do you think that there was enough of a relationship they had with Keely that they felt they could keep her around? And it was just, okay, well, the other option already won immunity, so she really is the only choice?
I think had Sally or Caleb or Loz, one of them won immunity, and Keely and Jackson were purely up for grabs, then I think Sally would have kept Keely. I think she would have seen this moment as I'm uniting the women, even though Loz brought it up. I'm uniting the women. I saved Keely. I got rid of Jackson. That's 3 moves in the one go. So I think she 100% would have been tempted. And I think what's really interesting about Sally is every single person has said, I'm taking you to final three. And she's like, win. This is a win for me. Where I think you need to ask yourself, why is everyone saying that to me? No,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same with, and I think Keely reads this well. They're saying, we'll take you to final three. And in Keely's mind, you're like, what? Who's taking me to final three? No, none of you are taking me to final three. That's bull. That's bull. So I think had they both been up for grabs, I think Sally would have been so overwhelmed with this idea of making a massive move that she probably thought, hey, I can make 3 moves here. I can convince Keely to give me the idol. I can play it for Keely and I can send Jackson home. That like and unite the women. This is a win-win. Only for it to probably backfire the next vote.
Oh,
But
I'm sure. Yeah, because that's the thing is that, yes, it would give maybe Sally some more outs here because I think what Sally is probably fearing next episode would be fire making at the very most, right? Because the good thing about a Final Four, especially it being a vote in Australian Survivor, is that you just need at least one person on your side to give you
yeah,
a chance. And so you want to give yourself as many outs as possible. The downside would be, again, as Loz and Caleb literally talk about at the beginning of this episode, if Keely wins immunity, then you are just obviously served up as
yeah,
the next target. And so giving yourself as odd as it might be a shield at that Final Four might help here, especially with someone you feel like you have a working relationship with. But let's talk about Loz here.
yes.
Welcome to the season, Loz. So we finally get that backstory and we get her perspective about how it's time to be lethal. And so she tries at least to make a move to start the momentum going against Caleb here. Give me your thoughts on this. Ultimately, something that doesn't pay off, at least in this episode, but might bear some fruit next week.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of it is true. Like
Mm.
I think her pitching Caleb is the right way to keep Keely close and to me, watching them play, I didn't think Sally bought any of it. Like, I think Sally was like, "Yeah, I'm here to have the conversation. I'm here to be involved in the conversation." I don't know how much of it was true from Loz's end. Um, Again, I think she's also overwhelmed with this idea, I need to make a big move, and it seems like what's really being given a lot of credit is, um, Jackson voting out Harry and then Brooke voting out Simon and Jackson voting out Ben. So turning on your ally seems to have a lot of weight to it. So maybe that's what she's thinking. If I turn on my closest ally, you've got to give me the same accolades that you're giving Brooke and Simon over here. Um, I don't know how much of it was true though. I think it was just a way to maybe, just play with Keely just to not make it too obvious. But it was interesting how paranoid that made Caleb even in the moment at tribal. But more so, he was more paranoid about Sally when we were like, no, the information is coming from Loz.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I'm kind of surprised how scuttled that plan wound up being. Where again, Loz doesn't even vote against Caleb here. It seems like she's really making the moves, really again putting the red backs together, saying this is a real alliance now. We're gonna bite Caleb, paralyzing his chances of winning. But then, as soon as the two of them have a conversation, and we've seen this a couple times before in this particular season, where it's like, I'm gonna do this thing. Oh crap, they found out. Well,
yeah,
never mind. We saw this a couple times with head office trying to turn on Mark at certain points in the pre-merge. And so she decides to sort of lie dormant here. Because here's the thing, like, I'm not mad at the move as a general concept. Again, I do feel like Loz's best chance at this point is sitting at the end against Sally. Because I do feel like, again, from our perspective, it doesn't feel like Caleb's really pissed anybody off. You could argue on paper the only person he has really pissed off is Mark, who wasn't pissed off in the least, who said, like, great job, Caleb.
yeah,
I'm so happy you did that.
yeah,
And left the game. And Caleb even says to a certain extent, like, yeah, I want to take Loz to the end because I think I can beat her. I'm sure she's very cognizant of that as well. The thing, though, is it comes down to timing. And it's so weird because we only have a couple of rounds left. But as they spoke about with Keely at one point, like, she could turn on Caleb next episode where she could force fire making, or if the momentum's going against him, like she could lead the charge, or if she wins that final immunity challenge, which she could stand a fair chance of doing. Like she spoke in this episode about how fit she's got. she made it to that final 2 of that challenge where, everyone was guilting Simon into dropping. So there is a chance she could do so, and she can make that move there. There's still a couple of opportunities, which makes me then wonder why she was putting that info out now, because it seemed like, as you mentioned, I don't know how much she was willing to stick her neck out to do that right here, right now. And if it was just done to kind of like satiate Keely, give her a bone to gnaw on so she's not trying to turn things against Loz, even though, again, did not help whatsoever. Keely was more than happy to gnaw on her femur as soon as the
Yeah.
episode started. So it's again, I think that the move is certainly one that makes sense for Loz, and I think is something she's going to try to go after as soon as next episode. I just feel like this might have been a little too early in the planting season for her to put those seeds in the ground.
Yeah, I think for me it read she obviously knew previously that Sally had gone for Caleb. Like Caleb's name is so easily thrown out there, but the plan never caught. Like it's never solidified. So I think maybe this could be Loz's way of trying to pull Sally back in and really solidify that they're the two and Caleb is the third. So you've mentioned Caleb. Now I'm going to mention Caleb and I'm going to see what you do with that information. And to Sally's credit, she doesn't say anything. In fact, it's Jackson that outs Loz. But you're saying it's too early. For me, I think it's too late. I think
Mm.
I think had she done it earlier, she probably would have been in the good graces of Jackson and in the good graces of Keely, and people would probably want to work with her a little bit more because she is flexible. And then on the flip side, you could be totally right. It's too soon, and I think she's banking on a similar situation where she gets into the final 3 and she wins that last challenge, and she's the one that gets to make that decision. That to me is not enough. It's
Yeah.
not enough to win.
Yeah, it's sort of too little, too late, though. Again, it depends on who's sort of personified at that final 3 as, the big game, right? Like, if Jackson goes out at 4 and Laws is picking between him and Sally, maybe that is something, especially compared to Sally. If it is between, like, him, Caleb and Jackson, then you're basically picking who you lose to. At least I would
Yeah.
imagine here, unless she really turns things on to Caleb. But again, I can imagine from a juror's perspective, as much as they keep an open mind, I've heard from many people who say, like, largely their opinions of people and their games are pretty set in like quick dry cement. There's a chance you could pull things out of there and not have
Yeah.
it set in stone, but like the vast majority of the time, that's going to be the case.
Yeah, and I think all of them, but Sally and Loz in particular, are reading the jury incredibly accurate. They know that
Mm.
they know what the jury are going to want. They know what the jury are going to give credit to. So there's no beating around that bush. They are fully aware of the type of jury that they have, and I think they're just pushing at anything to show them something that is different than something that they've seen, but it's slightly the same. So I think look, I can't imagine being in a final 5 situation. I didn't get there. So I'm not going to pretend like I could even figure this out, but it's almost like you've just got to commit to the bit. Sally, if you're going to get the idol of Keely, commit to the bit. Loz, if you're going to backstab your number 1, commit to the bit, because it's just having an idea is not a move. Talking about an idea is also not a move. So unless you do it, it will mean nothing.
Yeah, incredibly well said. I want to talk about the Caleb perspective on things as well, because I thought he did a really admirable job reacting to this and recovering from this. There's one very small detail, but I thought it was very smart on Caleb's part, where Laws comes back to the fire and Caleb begins to stoke the flames in more ways than one, basically being like, "Oh, I heard you were floating my name out there." And Laws asks who. Caleb says Keely. He
Yeah.
does not say Jackson. And I think that is such a smart move on Kayla's part, because his goal, right, is to get rid of Keely. This makes the most sense for him. Again, she is a direct threat to his game in so many ways, and he feels like he can win in this sort of status quo situation where Keely goes now, Jackson goes next.
Yeah.
basically, as long as he either wins the challenge or gets taken, he's going to win no matter what. And so he wants to keep things squarely pointed on Keely. So he fudges the truth a little bit, as much as Laws is
Yeah.
fudging the truth to him of like, nope, I didn't say anything at all. I was just out in the jungle for, a couple walks, collecting seashells, etc. Caleb does say like, oh no, Keely was the one that threw you under the bus. And again, I'm sure when I get the chance to talk to Laws, I'll ask about this. Like, was that also something that could have scuttled the plan? Is if Laws feels like takes him at face value that Keely was the one who said it, she's like, damn it, I knew Keely was desperate. So I guess like she bit the hand that fed her. I'm not going for Caleb
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
But I imagine there's also value to like, again, this is maybe a page out of Mark's playbook, right? Just like calling something out to somebody's face, kind of catching them red-handed and having them shirk away as a result of like, oh, you're coming for me. And Law's like, no, no, absolutely not. I wouldn't do that. And so there is a
Yeah.
certain aspect I imagine of like, oh crap. Well, as much as I want to make this bold move, like if he sees it coming, that there's a long amount of time until tribal council happens. Like things could easily get scuttled. So like, let me call this off. Let me pull a mulligan. Try again in a couple days. For now, I'll lock in with Caleb to try to take out Keely.
Yeah, I thought it was a great read on Caleb on the whole situation. He obviously knew that his name had been brought up before as kind of this dummy vote. And so he does the right thing in saying, "Well, I know you're having conversations with Keely, so let me just nudge this a little bit more. Let me just push Keely off the ledge here." And and it's so hard to go the other direction when you're being confronted like that. And he handled it really well. I think as chaotic as Caleb is, he has an eloquent way of depicting the narrative or telling us what's going on. And I think for Loz, as much as she might be trying to get rid of him, he is still giving her information. So she doesn't need to question it just yet. So I think does that scare Loz in the moment and make her, run away? What I would have done, not that my opinion matters, what I would have
No,
done
it
is
absolutely matters.
I would have told this idea that Loz has, if she really wanted to go through with it, I would have exploited Keely so much for her paranoia and her desperate need to stay in the game. I would have told her at tribal council, I would have said, whatever you do, you and Jackson, put your vote on Caleb. If all goes well, put your vote on Caleb in that moment. And she's desperate. She would have done it. So I think it's just all this shoulda, woulda, coulda. It's about reading who you're playing with. And I think this is a great example of Caleb reading who he's playing with. Because had he said Jackson, I think Loz would have been like, Jackson, you're gonna believe Jackson, are you? Like you guys have been fighting this whole time. Why are you
Yeah.
believing Jackson? So I think it was, it was super subtle. And I'm so glad you brought it up because I made a note of it because I said, yes, Caleb, correct. That's the correct move there.
Yeah, and I thought you'd bring up a really good point as well about how Keely and Jackson are so desperate that it's only positive if they then take this information and run with it, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
not going to do them any harm if they then use this information to try to put a wedge between Caleb and Laws. Remember, they are trying to not only leave this vote intact, but to really put a wedge in the newbies and the underdogs, whatever you want to call them. And so you give them the opportunity to do that, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it is a little shisty if you're at tribal council and you pull them aside and you're like, vote for Caleb. I'm going to make something happen. But better that than to like give them time to use this information against you. So I think
Yeah.
that again, it not only comes down to timing of the round, but with this cast especially, it sometimes comes down to timing of the day because as we've
Yeah.
seen numerous times, including at this tribal council, like if someone hears something, they are not hesitant whatsoever to just go to that person the very next second and be like, you will not believe what I just heard.
Yeah. And I always say this to people, tribal council is yours. Do whatever you want. Make it live every single time. If you need to, if your back is against the wall, I was more surprised that Keely didn't say, Sally, I need to talk to you. Loz, I need to talk to you. Like I thought that that probably could have happened, but Sally must have she must have felt secure a little bit for her not to do that, or at least that's what we saw. Um, so I think it was just a really interesting. Everyone did this to like get to the point, and I was like,
Yeah.
stop, just drive straight. And I thought this was a great opportunity, like you said, for Keely and Jackson to exploit this wedge, make a bigger deal about Loz bringing up your name, Caleb, and then like handball it to Sally. Sally's got to deal with trying to bring them back together. But the bigger the wedge, the better, because it's only going to help Jackson tomorrow and the next day and the next day.
I gotta say, the storytelling in this episode, again, super intriguing. Like you said, perhaps overcomplicating the way this vote was happening just because of, again, the meta and the endgame narratives that were weighing on a couple of these people. But man, the Craigslist misconnections of Keely and Sally that we were being given was like so gutting, yet so much fun. Of, Sally and Keely talking in a very like coded language where Sally's trying to get Keely to reveal that she found the other half, but remember, Keely thinks that Caleb has the other half, and so she's like basically not going to admit to anything, right? Because she doesn't want to see what happened to Brooke. She wants to be able to use that idol to feign something.
Yeah.
And it's only when Sally pulled out that half idol, I'm like, okay, yes, now we could get on the same page. And I'm sure Keely was just as grateful there. And the deal is made. It just led to, again, more of an unfortunate outcome for Keely. But what did you
Yeah.
make of that? As much stuff was going on in that afternoon, surprisingly, the one that didn't was this like almost Romeo and Juliet-esque ironic miscommunication between the two.
See, this is why you don't talk in code. Don't talk in code. If you're going to be Sally and you're going to be as transparent as you are, don't talk. Don't. Now is not the time to talk in code. And I think if she truly wanted to keep Keely, she would have told her then and there, I've got the other half. Let's do something. But it was just so interesting to watch them do this little dance with each other about, I'm not going to say it. And I'm not going to say it.
You go first.
I'm not doing it. And I think this shows the difference between a player like Sally and Caleb, where Sally will dance around the truth, where Caleb will rewrite it. He'll sit next to Brooke and go, with the half that you have, say I have the other half, just hypothetically. And he hooks her. She goes, well, I do have the other half in code. So I think had Sally done the same dance that Caleb did, maybe Keely would have given a little bit more, because I think had Keely known Sally had it earlier, I think, yeah, she probably would have divided that wedge a bit,
Yeah.
like a bit bigger. But it was just it's so fascinating to watch, because that is truly accurate about how you speak to people in Survivor, especially someone who's not your number. You're just like, I'm just trying to give you a little bit so you can give me a little bit. And I'm not lying to you, but I'm just telling you what you need to know. And if you could tell me what I need to know, that would be great. And then it doesn't work anyway. So you're like, I should have just spoken frankly. So I just found it entertaining. I was like, this is good. This is fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's look ahead to next week here, Noonan. And thank you to everybody who clarified to me in the comments that we do know the schedule for next week. It'll be a final 4 vote on Sunday. It'll be a final 3 vote on Monday. So we'll spend an entire round dedicated to the final 3. Thank God those loved ones get brought in to give us a little bit more time to pad out the episode. And then Tuesday, it's going to be the finale, the final 2. So final tribal council, winner reveal, and the reunion, which we have not seen since All Stars. This is the first post-pandemic reunion we have seen. So let's look ahead to the final 4 here.
Yes.
I feel like there are 2 basic doors we can go through here. So let's say Jackson does not win immunity. Let's start there. Do you think it is as easy as an open and shut 3-1 against Jackson? Or do you think Jackson can get someone like Sally or Loz on his side to vote out Caleb? Or even Caleb on his side to vote for Loz?
I think all those possibilities could very well become true, because I think the weight of making a move is so heavy on Sally and Loz that this is their final opportunity to either do it to Caleb or do it to each other. And I think Jackson has a good way of talking to them where they listen, and he's emotional and he might ramble, and gets to the point eventually. So I think that's a real possibility that he could convince, especially these two ladies, hey, this is your, I know I don't have immunity, but this is what the jury is talking about. Are you just going to sit in the majority here and vote off? Are you going to make it that easy? Like, let's do something. And I think that Sally and Loz are thinking about it so much that that just might be enough to convince them. I've got to get rid of Caleb, or I've got to get rid of Sally, or whatever way he twists it. So I'm nervous. I don't know how it's going to pan out, because I think, yeah, like I said, it's the individuality of their moves isn't as strong as I think they'd like it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense from Jackson's perspective that he would want Caleb to go here. I think as
Mm,
much fun as it would be for all of us if the two of them sat in the end here, I feel like Caleb is his biggest threat in terms of a narrative perspective. I mean, if he feels like he has to win out no matter what, then maybe get rid of the biggest endurance threat, which actually might be a Loz there. Yeah, you are keeping someone in who probably won't take you to the end and stands a better chance of winning than a Loz or a Sally. But like, then at least you, again, like many of your allies before you, Caleb, or sorry, Jackson, you're trying to bank on like, well, I'm going to give myself the best chance of just winning out from here
yeah,
on out, which again has been a little bit of a folly in previous instances here. I could see a world where like I could see a world where he tries to bring Laws over to at least force a tie of like, hey, at least give me a chance against
yeah,
Caleb here. Wouldn't that be a move for you? And then Laws could then be able to think, okay, well, I'll just take him out at the final three, or he could possibly think Laws is my biggest threat in the final three because she's better at endurance. So let me go to Sally. Let me even go to Caleb and be like,
yeah.
remember what I told you last time? Like, you don't think she's going to make that move against you at the final three? So he has a lot of arguments he could possibly pitch there. But let's get into the much juicier scenario here, Noonan. Let's say that Jackson wins immunity and these
Mm.
three are forced to turn on one another. Now Jackson is in a bit of power here because, you know, you would imagine that Caleb and Laws would vote together. Maybe not after this most recent episode. So he could join the throng, or he could sort of do what like Mike Holloway did in Worlds Apart, which is like, listen, I'm going to have you fight for it right now. I'm going
Yeah.
to have you really scrap against each other. So what do you think might happen then in that instant? Do you think Caleb and Laws would do as they planned at the beginning of this episode and try to at least tie the votes against Sally? Or do you think that now this crack is going to develop into an entire fissure between the two?
I think, oh, that's hard. In a perfect world, I would love Jackson and Caleb to align at this final moment. And and I think Jackson,
Jackson tried. He told Caleb, like, hey, vote with me. I've got you to the end. And Caleb's like,
yeah,
that's great. Let's pick in on that tomorrow.
yeah, and I think Jackson has, in a way, become fearless in the game, where he's like, "Let's go to rocks, let's force a tie." So he's like, "Put if I win, Caleb, let's force a tie. I'll give you fire. Let's do that. And if you win fire, I'll guarantee I take you tomorrow." And you could make all these wheel and deal all these scenarios. I just think that Caleb will want to stick with Loz and will probably go for someone like Sally, because I think you even saw when he was talking about bringing Loz, he wasn't just saying, I can beat her, but if she won, I'd be happy. And I think that will play on him emotionally. And I think Loz will do the opposite. I think Loz will be so overwhelmed with this idea of making a big move that she will forget Sally, because in her mind, she beats Sally. I want Sally in the final three because if I win, I'm taking her. And even so, that potentially that could play into Jackson's mind. Like, they all want to take Sally. So it's how do they maneuver that to make sure no matter what happens, Sally Sally stays, but there's something in Jackson's eyes where he just wants this dramatic ending. So if he wins, I I wouldn't be surprised if he stuck to Caleb and they're like, "Look, we've been going at it this whole time. Let's insert some sort of coach quote here about Vikings and fighting people and the dragons at the end. I don't know what he says. And let's do that." And Caleb could very well fall for it, and it could be, mwah, chef's kiss. But oh, there's just so many possibilities that it's hard to predict.
Yeah, that's the thing is I do feel like Sally and Loz would stick together. Again, I think they'd be incentivized to stick together because they are each other's best chance in the end. So that's at least 2 votes against Caleb. So I think it really falls on Jackson of,
Yeah.
okay, do you want to get out somebody who is probably your biggest threat in the final 2, or do you want to spice things up a little bit if you're sitting from this place of safety no matter what? And yeah, he might go for the latter. And it's always interesting with fire, right? Because like we see in the era of forced fire making in the US of like, you sometimes you have people like petitioning themselves to the immunity winner, be like, you gotta put me in fire. This is my last chance to impress the jury. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that would be the case in Australian Survivor. I don't think Loz or Sally is like, yep, put me in fire. So that way I can, there's no like big bad at this point, right? To really take down and showcase that you individualistically did that. Because again, with it being a vote, you have to get somebody on your side to do that.
Yeah.
And I feel like depending on who you are as well, like I think Jackson could easily be the one to make the argument more so of like, look at this. I was able to get Caleb and Loz to go against each other in
Mhm.
fire. I took out one of the best options for everybody in the end game rather than Loz and Caleb being like, look what I was able to do. I took my
Yeah.
closest ally out in fire. It rings a little differently.
Yeah, and I think another aspect is if they figure out that everyone wants to take Sally, then Sally instantly becomes the threat because then they're like, well, they're not taking, like Loz could very well go, well, they're not taking me. So if I get rid of Sally, then they are forced to take either me or Caleb in the final 3. So that's another thing that I'm
Mm.
sure they're thinking about. And I think if Jackson does win immunity, Caleb has to be careful in not making this Jackson's move. It has to be Caleb's move because if he gives it to Jackson, then the pressure of beating Jackson the next time round is even bigger because now he has an extra move on you. Whereas if this becomes, I would just work really hard, all 3 of them, Sally, um, Caleb and Loz work really hard to make sure that if he does win, it's not Jackson's move. This isn't Jackson's decision. And on the flip side, Jackson could also be super crazy and go, you know what? The only person I can't beat here, guaranteed, is Caleb. So, Caleb, you're going to be doing fire. And here's my immunity necklace, Sally. And I'll go up against Caleb. Imagine that.
Oh, wow. I mean, that would be something that a professional wrestler would do at the last
Yeah.
second. Be like, nope, I'm throwing myself into the ring. I'm not standing by the side.
He's going to give his line. He's going to go, this is my show now. And I say fire. That's what
Yeah,
he's
but
going
then
to
he's
say.
going to do exactly what he did last time. Be like, nope, but I'm not giving up immunity.
Yeah.
He'll change his
Yeah.
mind in the voting booth. All right. Well, before we get into the Chizzy, I'd be remiss, Noonan, not to memorialize our most recently fallen soldier in the form of Keely because I absolutely adored watching her. I think that when we were going to the season, we expected certain types of energetic gameplay from the known quantities, right? From
Mhm.
Mark, from Brooke, from Simon, from Harry. But Keely quite literally came out of nowhere. And the second she sat down at that Dawn Tribal Council and through merely her own doing, single handedly made a majority flip happen with Mark being in the dark. I still consider it one of the most impressive individual moves I've seen in this season. And it goes to show like how lethal Keely was in this game. She was called Killer Keely for a reason. Now, look, all that is to say, I'm officially waving the white flag here. Okay. Multiple times I've come onto this podcast being like, okay, let me try to rationalize why Brooke flipped on Simon, why Keely flipped on Brooke here. Let's give him some Chizzy points. Clearly, there's merit to the move. I give up at this point. Okay, people, don't turn on your number one allies at this point,
Yeah.
especially when you have immunity. The Survivor gods want a rock draw to happen this season. That much is
Yes.
clear. They have punished those who have prevented that outcome from happening directly. Yes, Brooke had the Cameron vote to be able to evade the bullet, but it eventually came for her. Keely had the bullet immediately come for her. It turns out that if you take out your shield, if you're playing if you're playing one of those old school arcade games, you shoot through your shield to get the aliens, sure, that can help you in the moment, but then you'll leave yourself incredibly vulnerable. So Listen, it's accurate that we're talking on episode 21 here, Noonan, because it goes to show that Keely is the most recent person to make an incredible gamble on their part that turned out to ultimately be the incorrect one. But it is not to obfuscate some of the really great stuff that Keely was able to do throughout this entire season.
Yeah, and I've told her, like, you should be so incredibly proud of just having the confidence and the balls to make these moves and make them at the right time. I think and a lot of us have said this, our worst nightmare ever as a rookie player is turning up on day one on the mat and seeing returnees. It's your
Mm.
worst nightmare because you know from a game point of view, they are going to dominate. But also, this is a TV show. They're going to dominate. No matter how crazy my move is, it's not going to compare to a move that Harry makes in that dynamic. So I think Keely was incredibly smart at attaching herself to a returnee in the same way, kind of like Lottie was. You're either for or an against a returnee. And she made the right move with Mark and Faith. And I think she was individual enough where she could break away and have the confidence to keep her allies in the dark, knowing that she could have this amazing recovery rate the next day. Survivor is depends, like your luck in the game is there, but if you cannot recover from the things you do or don't do, that can severely get you in the end. And she was able to recover so beautifully that you're rooting for her every time she's going to tribal. You want Keely to be the winner. Like I said, she had the check written out like on day 12, getting rid of Don. So I think people are like, oh, are we talking about it too much? No, we're not talking about Keely enough. She has just she should like, I can't even speak. I hope every new person that ever plays takes a leaf out of her book about this is how you play Survivor when you get given the opportunity. You make moves, you run with it, you recover, you lie, you tell the truth, you find idols, you do all of it. And it was just so, as a fan, as someone who's tried to get on the show so many times, we all wish we played a game like Keely. Like, it was just amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of freedom that Keely played with in this game. And she sort of came in with the narrative, right, of like, I bust criminals for a living. Now it's my turn to do it. Sort
Yeah.
of like Sarah Lucina adjacent. And I will also say that Keely's reads, especially in the moment, were remarkable. Like, we will
Mm.
always remember that Blanche Tribal Council where Keely absolutely took this gamble and put her own neck on the line by taking the idol off of her neck and playing it
Yeah.
on Brooke. Like, do you understand the amount of gumption that takes to do that, knowing that Simon is not an option? They're
Mm.
only splitting, you imagine, between the two of you. Like, you have to bank on a lot of gut feeling
Yeah.
to be able to make the right move here. And she did. And it was something that bought her obviously a lot of days in the future, because otherwise she would have gone home as a result of that. And listen, you live by the roll of the dice, you die by the roll of the dice. Clearly, she
Yeah.
did that with Brooke here. And maybe when I get the chance to talk with her, maybe there'll be other reasons that she could talk about as to why she felt the need to turn on Brooke in this moment. It seemed like maybe she was trying to bank on some relationships with the newbies that ultimately did not wind up happening in the
Yeah.
end. But again, it goes to show that, you know, even the most well-read players, most literate players when it comes to the dynamics of the game can sometimes make the wrong reads, can sometimes take risks that end up blowing up in their face in the end. But even looking at Keely's overall body of work, what she did worked much more often than it didn't. And
Yeah.
I am going to imagine that, you know, if they do more returnee seasons after this, Keely is like 1A, the person to bring back from this
Yeah.
season.
She's at the top of the list. And I think what is so great about Keely and watching her play is the further you get along, the further you go along, the more confident you get. And when you reach a stage like Merge, when you're going to make the jury and you're on the bottom, like they were the underdog. You almost are like, I have nothing to lose. So if I play my idol on Brooke and I go home, at least you're going to remember me. At least you're going to
True.
remember me as the player that had balls and did it. It didn't work out, but I still did it. And I think that's what plays out eventually is Keely had been, and I think I've said this before, had been this apprentice this whole season, watching Mark, even watching Harry, watching Simon, watching all these players do crazy things, that she went, okay, I've been the apprentice for too long and now I'm the master. So goodbye, Brooke. I'm truly the last returnee standing. So I think, and it doesn't work out, but how poetic was it anyway? So you can't, I hope she's not like you beat yourself up after every decision you make when you get voted out. But I hope she's not beating herself up after that one, because I think it just shows how far she'd come as a player, where she's like, I will no longer hide behind a player who I was almost emulating. I'm now Killer Keely is here now. So and you're gonna remember her. So
I'm sure if I'm already filling in the blanks as to how she would respond, I think she would say like, I would have had to win out anyway, and maybe those next challenges wouldn't have favored me. So like you said, better to, I mean, I would say better to die on your feet than live on your knees. But again, Sally kind of forced her to her knees at a certain point by being like, give me your half idol, beg for it. I was going to take you out anyway.
Yeah. And I think knowing like Keely had won 2 and she's like, I can beat Brooke, but how long can I beat Brooke for? And so it all, and again, it was the right move for everyone to get rid of Brooke, as the same as it is getting rid of Keely. It's the right move for everyone. So you can't deny that.
Yeah. So strategy for future Survivor players. Every season is different, but shields work here, especially if you are getting rid of someone, but then the express path forward of I have to win out from here on out, as was the case here. Challenges are always going to be a bit of a random array. So count on your relationships more than perhaps what might be awaiting you the next time you walk into a random desolate field and David Janae is greeting you with a smile.
100%. That's why she should have gone to rocks. Stop robbing us of rocks. Stop doing it.
All right.
Can
well,
you
we shall
imagine
see. Oh, I mean, it would have been absolutely incredible. But let us see who we might be robbing of Chizzy points. There's only 5 options here and 3 people to give points to. So the moment has arrived. Take it away, Jacob Singer Weinstein and MC Kadar.
2, 3. 1, 1, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's getting kind of Chizzy. 3, 2, 1.
All right, Noonan. Lots again of surprising momentum being made leading up to this vote against Keely. Maybe some less well-informed moves than others. You could still give a point to Keely if you want to do the legacy move. So the door is open here. Who are you inviting inside to the Chizzy Manor here?
It's 3, 2, 1, isn't it?
It's 3, 2, 1. You could go 1, 2, 3 if you want to do a little bit of a dramatic reveal. Would be very appropriate for AU.
Okay, I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3 because it's very dramatic for me. I'm gonna give 1 to Loz.
Okay.
Because I think her idea of flipping on her closest ally is the right direction in terms of I need a big move. So I'm going to give her credit, even though this probably should have happened, I think, earlier. I'm going to give her 1 because it's time, and I'm glad she realized it. It's better late than never. But I'm going to give 1 to Loz. There's only 5 people.
Yeah. All right. Who's getting your 2?
2, I'm going to give to Caleb.
Okay.
Because again, I think that subtle read of not panicking when he heard his name, at tribal, trusting his instincts. Let's have that final conversation one more time. I think these are all important things in this end game, this phase that we're in now. And I think he is playing the right moves at the right time. Despite hearing his name potentially from Loz, he knows it's not the right time to get rid of her yet, because I still need the numbers if Jackson doesn't win tomorrow. And I like that forward thinking. And then 3, no, I mucked up here, didn't I? I'm going to have to I can't give 3 to Keely.
You can if you want to. It's your points.
Oh,
this is the one and only time you're doing Chizzy points. I mean, you can shuffle things around. These are not like set in stone particularly.
I'm gonna give I'm gonna give 3 to Keely.
Okay.
Because
Nice gift on the way out. A nice severance gift.
yeah, because I think even when she has that conversation with Sally and they're dancing around the truth, it just shows how smart of a player she is because she doesn't know that Sally has it. So why reveal her secrets if she's not if to someone that if this was a Caleb conversation, maybe she would have said something. But she doesn't know that Sally has it. And then at tribal to still have the balls to go, yep, I'll give it to you because you're telling me you're going to play it for me. I have nothing left to lose. And, maybe you can have some of my balls and play it for me. It doesn't work out. But I just think she is so subtle, and I don't want people to mistake that as a weakness because even in these dying moments, she might have not stood up and made a big fuss about leaving, but she still is playing Keely's game, and I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give it to Keely.
I think that she purposely perhaps put herself in a corner, but like she was doing everything she could to get herself out of that corner. Or maybe it does say something that like it seemed to get as close as it did, right? That she still had Jackson on her side,
Yeah.
that she was able to bank. I was surprised that after this conversation with Caleb in last night's episode that like we didn't see anything of that. That Caleb was just like, yeah, I basically said that to get rid of Keely next time. But she was seemingly trying to get Sally on board until the very last minute. And look, it's your Chizzy points to do whatever you want. So please honor,
Yeah.
again, as I said, maybe the 1A possible returnee to actually become a returnee from this season.
Yeah. She deserves it.
All right. So I will speaking of deserve, actually, so I believe those 3 points might put Keely over Brooke here and make her the official Chizzy winner of Australian Survivor Redemption. Like, unless, if we give away some posthumous points next week, maybe that will change. But she has currently passed Brooke, and the other options are not nearly as close. Like, depending on how things shake out, maybe if someone like Caleb like sweeps the board next week, then he could possibly overtake it. But it's still a lot of lead to make up ground for. I will not give points to Keely because I have done a fair amount of that, and I'm punishing her because I gave her a good amount last time, and then this happened, Keely. This is what happens when you play with fire. Not literally, because you didn't even make it to fire at this point. I will start by giving 3 to Caleb. I do think that, yes, he was in danger here, but like, as we mentioned, I think that whether it was him just spooking Loz or, getting Jackson and Keely to vote for Loz, it seems like he was able to really just scuttle any plans of getting rid of him. I, again, really think that very small but significant move of him trying to put the blame onto Keely was a really good call. And ultimately, he got what he wanted. He started the episode saying, we got rid of Brooke, Keely's next, and he was able to accomplish that despite the squirreliness of Loz and Sally possibly putting a spanner in those works. So, and the fact of the matter is as well, like, I think he is in a really good position here. That yes, there is a chance that now that Loz has a little bit of taste of blood in her mouth, that she formally makes the move next time. But like, Jackson is still, I think, a bigger threat than him, and it feels like he, at least in this moment, has Loz in his corner. Or it could be a scenario where like he could try to convince Jackson to force a tie. So it doesn't feel like he is now sort of like we talked about with Brooke and Keely, like now he's the next target in line. I think he has some outs here, and I would not be surprised in the least if he ends up being our winner next week. This might be a little unorthodox. I'm going to give 2 to Jackson. It's weird because Jackson, for the umpteenth time, was left out of the vote. But I would say if I'm like apportioning points, 1, he gets because he wins immunity. And again, I do think, as we talked about before, there's a non-zero chance that like if him and Keely are both vulnerable, that he gets voted out instead. And so I really do think, to a certain extent, he saved himself by winning this challenge and ensuring Keely's boot, even though he is now left incredibly vulnerable. And I'll give another one to him for like making use of that safety, right? That he did not necessarily lie dormant. He was clearly trying to stir things up between Caleb and Loz. He ultimately makes this very false, or not false to him, but what ends up not coming to fruition pitch to Caleb of like, you vote with me, you're locked in with me until the end of the game. Caleb doesn't go through with it, but like he was clearly trying to do stuff and stir things up, which I will
Yeah.
commend him for. I think I'm going to give one to Sally. I'm really going back and forth between Sally and Loz. Again, I do feel like the public displays of this were not great. Like, I'm really intrigued to see if this was leaving as much of a bad taste in Keely's mouth as initially expected, that it feels a little bit like, why did you do that? You were toying with her. But you talked about the very beginning of the podcast about how, like, there were some merits to this, there were some possible values, and also the fact of the matter is she was one of the most locked in safe people in this episode. Now, maybe that's because she's being, considered this GOAT, but she really was the go-between. She had a lot of power here. I may not agree with what she did with said power, particularly when it came to this half idol, but I usually, with this Chizzy, as I've talked about this week, I tend to be able to at least give some credit to those who like are actively doing things in this episode. And whether or not you necessarily agree with it all, I think Sally did some stuff to necessitate a Chizzy point here. Yes, it may be quite too little too late, but I think Sally was able to try to make things with the limited amount of resources that she had. The question is, will it be a good final product at the end of the day?
Yeah. We shall see.
We shall see. Well, Noonan, this was a really fantastic time. I thought you brought in some really great insights as to everything that went on with this episode. Again, it's weird because if you just look at the voting chart, you're like, oh, okay, this was a 3-2 vote Keely, nothing happened. But there was so much happening, particularly when it came to Loz and Sally, both separately, but perhaps equally, having these existential crises of like, crap, I need something. What do I do? So there was plenty to discuss, and you were so fantastic in the points you were making. So thank you so much for coming on and talking about it all with me. Of course, if people want to check out all the stuff you're doing just out there in the world in general, how can they do so?
Yeah, every time someone asks me to plug my socials, I am only really on Instagram and X and stuff like that. But my Instagram handle, I've spelt my name wrong. So if you can't find me, that's why.
That's the perfect low-key way to remain anonymous. Is like, well, you can't find me out there.
Yeah. Oh, it's just another reason to prove to myself that I was a brawn and not a brain, because I can't even spell my own name right. But so it's Laura Noonan. It's fun. You'll figure it out, guys, but nothing too exciting. But I've had the best time. I'm so glad I finally got on here. It's
same. Well, I was so happy to have you on and talk everything about not only what happened in this episode, but what's to come. Because, we have 3 episodes left. I think you and I are hopefully doing some wishful thinking as to an interesting Final 4. Hopefully we get an interesting Final 3. I mean, again, if this season has proved anything, in particular this episode, is like, even if it's the most rote outcome, we are going to take the most unconventional path to it.
Yes.
So regardless, there will be a lot to talk about next week. And I think even more so after my exit interviews with the most recently eliminated 3 players get released, get to talk with Cameron about what the hell happened here. How much was he truly annoying people to get voted out when they had the clear majority? Of course, get the chance to talk with Brooke about her quite climactic journey in her final 40 days of playing the game. And of course, I get to hear all from one of the stars of this season, the returnee, essentially, in stature in the form of Keely. So you will not want to miss that or any of the stuff we have going on next week. We know globalsurvivor.com. Thank you, Noonan, again, so much for everything you brought to this podcast. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think is set up in pole position to win here? What did you make of the moves Loz and Sally were making to try to engender some resume building before we get into the final stretch? We are almost there, folks. But if this season has been any indicator, it will be far from a straightforward path to get to our final destination. Thank you all again so much for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.